Hello and welcome to the 6th video in the Unity Basics series where we finally put all of the things we've learned together and make a simple little game. You can see here that I am in a sample Unity project with nothing inside of the scene and nothing inside of the assets folder. We're going to start off by creating our player, which is going to be a 2D object, a sprite, and then a square. We can name this square player. And then I'm going to make him a bit longer on the y-axis, something around 2. So he looks like a car, maybe something around 1.75. And then we can reset the transform by just resetting it right there and just putting the scale back to 1.75. Inside of this player, we're going to add a few components. The first one being a rigid body 2D. It's going to be 2D since we are in a 2D game. The gravity scale we're going to set to 0 since this is going to be a top-down driving game. And then we are going to also add a box collider 2D to it. This is just so it can collide with other things and so that we can collide with the coins inside of our game. I'm going to change the color of my player, but you can keep it white if you want. I'm going to change it to blue. So here you can see that it looks just like that inside of the game view. And then now we have to create our coin. So I'm going to do that by creating a 2D object, a sprite, and then a circle. I'm going to name this coin prefab because we are going to be using prefabs just like we did in the last Unity Basics tutorial. This prefab, I'm going to add a tag to it. I'm going to add a tag coin. If you don't have this coin tag, you can go to tags and layers by going to your coin prefab, tags, add tag, and then here you'll click plus, and then you can click coin and click save. I already have coin right there, so you can just put it right there, and now your coin prefab has a tag named coin. I'm going to change the color to a yellow so it looks like a coin. I'm going to make it a bit darker than that though. And we're also going to have to add a circle collider 2D because this is a circle. You can see that the collider 2D is just that ring around it. If we turn off the sprite renderer, we can see that ring around it, and that's the collider. And then we are not going to need a rigid body 2D for this because our coin prefab is not going to be moving. So we're going to drag our coin prefab down inside of our assets and delete it from here because we are not going to need it inside of our hierarchy right now. We can create a folder for our prefab, name it prefabs. Just so we're organized a little bit, we can drag our coin prefab into there, and this is our prefabs. And now we're going to have to create a player controller script for our player controller. So inside of our player, we can click add component. We can type in player controller. It's going to look for a new script, and then we can just name it player controller, and then we're going to click create and add. It's going to create and add this script to our player so we don't have to add it in later. And then we can double click it and open it in our choice of coding editor. Once we are in our script, we're going to go to the top and create a few variables. The first one is going to be a serialized field private float, and this is going to be called speed. We can set this inside of the inspector, so we're not going to have to set it here. We're going to create another serialized field private float. This is going to be called turn speed. And then with that, we're going to go inside of our update method, and then we're going to call a method. This one's just going to be called move. You see, it's not going to be doing anything right now just because we don't have a move method right yet, so it's going to give us a little bit of an error before we have this method. So down after the update method, we can create a private void move method, and then this error will go away. Inside of this move method, we're going to create a few things. The first one, we're going to create a few more variables. So the first variable we will create is a float. It's going to be movement. We can name it movement because this is going to be our movement of the car. And we're going to set this equal to something inside of Unity that is input. I'm going to do input.get axis raw, and then we're going to do a string reference. So we're going to put our quotation marks, and we're going to type in there vertical. Make sure to spell it right, because if it's not spelled correctly, you will not get an error, but your code will also not work. See, input.getAccessRaw is something used for most physics, and it's when you push the keys set to the axis. For this vertical axis, it's W, S, and the up and down keys, so that will move us forward and backward, our car. And that is what input.getAccessRaw does. We're going to create another float, and this one's going to be called turn. This is going to be the same thing, but it's just going to be input.getAccessRaw, and it's going to be horizontal. So these are our two inputs, so that is good. And now we're going to check if we are turning or moving. So if we are turning, we can check that right here by if movement is not equal to 0. We do a not equal by doing a exclamation point with an equal sign. So if our movement is not equal to 0, so if we are moving, we can do another method. It's going to be transform.translate. Inside of here, it's going to look for a vector 3, and then we just create a new vector 3. Inside of this vector 3, it's going to look for 3 parameters, the x, y, and z axis. For the x, it's going to be 0. For the y, it will be our movement times our speed, so we go faster than just our regular movement. And then for the z, we'll just put 0. So this just moves our character forward and backwards. Now we're going to need something to move our character to turn it. So now we'll do if our turn is not equal to 0. So if we are turning, we will do transform.rotate. That means we will rotate our character in the amount that we want to. It's going to look for another vector 3, so we can just do a new vector 3. And instead of this time being on the x-axis, we will do 0, 0, and then on the z-axis, we will do our negative turn times our turn speed. See, this might seem a bit odd, but you will only be able to see it turning if the turn is on the z-axis. We can show this inside of Unity, and we also needed to do it negative because if we don't, then when we click the right arrow key, our player will turn left, which we don't want, so we're just going to opposite it by putting a negative sign right there. So now we can go back inside of our Unity editor, and once we're here, we can go to our player and scroll down to our player controller script. It's going to look for a speed and a turn speed. I'm going to set the speed to 0.05 and the turn speed to 1.25. That may seem a bit odd, but it'll make much more sense once we play the game, because it will go very, very fast if you set the speed to something like 1, and it will go very, very slow if you set the turn speed to something like 0.05. So let's save this scene up and click the play button to see if it is working. Right away we can see that nothing is happening, but that's just because I'm not pushing any of the keys. Once I start pushing the keys, we can see that my car is moving left and right, and that it is going forward and backward. This seems like a good speed for me, but I might want to actually change the speed up by a little bit. So we can set this speed to something like 0.075. See if that works. And then it does seem a bit faster, so I actually like that. So I'm going to get it a play mode, and then any edits that you make inside of play mode won't be saved, so you're going to have to come back and make them again. So I'm going to set that back to 0.075. And now we're going to make a script that places coins randomly along the map so that our player can pick them up and add to its score. So let's create a game object, an empty game object, and we can name this game manager, and then we can just reset the transfer. And then we're going to add another component, and it's going to be a game manager script. So a new script, we're going to name it game manager and click create and add. Once this new game manager script has been created, we can double click and we can open it up inside of our choice of coding editor. Once we are inside of our script, we can go to the top and create a few variables. The first one is going to be a serialized field game object, and we are going to call this our coin prefab. The second one, we're going to create a little timer inside of Unity so that our coin prefab is spawned every amount of seconds that we want it to. So we can go to the bottom and create a few public variables so that we can use them and look at them inside of the inspector. We're going to create a public float, and this one's going to be called time. And then we're going to create another public float, and we will name this one max time. So inside of our update, we're going to call a method, and this one's going to be called instantiate coin. This is just a method, so it's going to give us an error until we actually make it. So we're just going to create a private void instantiate coin. So now we have this method, so it will not give us an error right here. Inside of this instantiate coin method, we're going to create a little timer. So if our time is greater than 0, then we're not going to make the coin. So we're going to take our time minus equal it from time dot delta time. Time dot delta time is just the amount of time between frame updates inside of our game. It's a very simplistic way of saying it. So we can do another video on time dot delta time if you'd like. It is a very good thing to be using. It just makes all of your variables inside of your game much more consistent, because if we did a game on a computer that runs very, very fast, then the game would run much, much faster than a game if the computer if the computer was very slow. So time.delta time just gets rid of that and makes everything run the same amount of speed on the same amount of computers. But we're just going to use it for a little timer right here. So this thing, and then we're just going to do an else statement. So if our time is less than 0, then we are going to set our time, and we're going to set it equal to max time. Max time is going to be something above 0, so something like 2 or 3. So it's going to go down, and then it's going to be set back to this. And then we're going to instantiate. We're going to instantiate our prefab, our coin prefab, at a specific spot, but we're going to want to instantiate it at a random spot. So up at the top of this else statement, we're going to create a vector 2, and this one's going to be called position, and it's going to be equal to a new vector 2. This vector 2 is just going to be a position in our case. So for the x, it's going to be a random.range. Random.range just picks a random number between two points. So the random range that I want to do is the x value on our Unity editor. So we can go to our Unity editor and check how big this main camera is. So we'll go to our player, and then we'll check the position on the x. If we move it all the way over to here, it's -8, and if we move it all the way over to here, this is 8.2. So we can just make this, we can make the range between this as -8 and +8. We can do this again for the y, so we'll do a random.range, and then we will set the random.range equal to 4, or -4 to 4, which is the range of the y. So this is a position that is just a random that it will make every time. So we can set our instantiate at this position, and then it's going to look for a rotation, just like it did in the last tutorial. If you haven't watched the last tutorial on prefabs, I would recommend you watch that before you try to tackle this little project. This one is going to be a quaternion.identity, which is, if you remember, just the same rotation as the scene or the player that it is deriving from. So This thing will just instantiate the prefab on a timer. So we can go back into our game and check that this is working. We can put the player right back here in the middle, and then we're going to have to put this game manager onto this game manager object, and we see that we actually already have it. We're going to set this max time to something like 2.5, and then we can take our prefab and drag it in the game manager thing right here. So now our coin prefab is right there. We can save up our scene and click play to see that our coin is working. Right away we see a little coin right there, and then later we will see another coin popping up right here, another coin popping up right there, and then if we go to our game manager, since this is public, we can see that our time is going down. Once it reaches negative, it goes back to 2.5 and respawns one of these coins. What I want to do right now is make it so that whenever I hit one of these coins with my player, it destroys the coin and gives us a little boost to our score. So we can do that inside of the player controller script. So we can go to the player controller script, and then down there is a Unity method called onCollisionEnter2D. This is a Unity method, so it just gives us a collision 2D, and it's a collision named collision. So remember back inside of Unity, we made our coin prefab have the tag of coins, so we can use that to our advantage right here. So inside of this onCollisionEnter2D, this is called every frame, just like update. We can get an if statement to get our if collision dot game object dot tag. Game object here is spelled incorrectly. If our game object dot tag is equal to coin, meaning if the thing we are colliding with is a coin, then we're going to want to add to our player score. So what we can do is create a public integer, and we'll name it player score. I'm making this public just because if you want to add to this game, you're probably going to want to make the player score be able to get access from somewhere else. So we'll do a player score ++, so we'll add 1 to it, and then we're going to have to destroy the coin, which is pretty easy because Unity has a built-in method for that. We can just do destroy, and it's going to look for a game object, so we can just do our collision.game object. And this is just going to destroy the thing that we are colliding with. So we can go back into Unity and see that our collision is working. Once we're back in Unity, we can go to our player, just make sure that everything is correct. So we'll go down to the bottom here. It's gonna, our speed, turn speed, and our player score set to 0. That's all good. Our game manager, our max time is set to 0 time, and the coin prefab, this is all great. So if we click play, we should be able to see our game that is working. Right away, our coins are spawning in, and we can see that if I hit it, they do destroy. So if I go to the player and I check, and sure enough, yes, my player score is increasing by every single time I hit one of these coins, which is exactly what we want it to do. This is the end of this Unity Basics tutorial. I hope you learned something and had fun while making this mini project. If you like this tutorial, please give our channel a like and a subscribe, and share this tutorial with anybody that you think would benefit from it. Thank you.